Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we are talking about Move Over Bob, a new narrative to reinvigorate and diversify the trades. I'm excited to welcome today Kate Glantz, who is the co-founder and CEO of Move Over Bob, which is a media and lifestyle brand or movement, if you will, aiming to put tradeswomen front and center. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for being here. So I'm so excited for you to share your mission with our listeners. I think they're going to just love it, like I do. So we have a lot to discuss today. Before we really get into it, can you just start with sharing a bit about yourself, your journey, and how you have landed here with Move Over Bob?
Absolutely. It was not a linear journey. I will say that much. I think if I had to sum it up in a phrase, you could call me a do-gooder with an entrepreneurial spirit. I was fortunate to kind of always know what I was about, what I'm here to do. And so my career, if you looked at my LinkedIn or my resume, you might think I'm about nine different people. I've had a lot of different experiences in different industries, from tech to government to Hollywood. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I've had lots of startups, but the real through line that's always sort of governed how I make choices is how can I help women win, frankly. And at the end of the day, economic security, economic independence is probably the most important thing a woman needs to win.
Mhm.
That anyone needs, right? But that is where I focus most of my efforts, usually at the intersection of some mass media, marketing, creative endeavor, and impact.
Yeah, I love it. So before we talk about what Move Over Bob is and aims to accomplish, I want to talk about something that I read that you shared on LinkedIn when you were kind of reflecting on your journey here, right? You said you've landed at the intersection of your professional strengths, personal interests, and values. And I love that, right? And I think many people could understand like how getting to that intersection point would be a winding road, right? Like it takes time to understand like, what are my strengths? Like, what am I most passionate about? What are my interests? And what values do I hold dearly enough to want to like orchestrate my life around? So yeah, it all makes sense to me. But how does that alignment feel? And is this like the first time where you feel like all three have kind of come together?
Yeah, I will say it feels like butter. It just feels like I'm humming in the way I'm supposed to. Not to be woo-woo, but like the frequency that I wake up every day and feel equipped and aware to perform
Hmm.
is so much higher than when I haven't had that sort of equilibrium. And, I think like it's a rubric of sorts that you need to come up with for yourself. And
Hmm.
so the way and it takes a little bit of appetite for risk to put one foot in one direction and say, "Ooh, I didn't like that," or trying something completely out of your comfort zone because you have a hunch. But what I found, which again, this is maybe one of one, maybe it's not, but the things I need to really deliver professionally, and in turn be a happy person, it was three things that took me a while because I kept bumping my head against what wasn't in alignment. And those things
Hmm.
were autonomy. Before I ever knew anything about entrepreneurship, I was a government suit. I worked in a lot of roles that autonomy was like literally the last thing I had on the list. And so knowing for myself that I need to be in roles where I can execute on my vision and really build in a creative way, that's really huge. Another is resources.
Hmm.
You might have a scrappy startup, but you have no resources. And so that is also, you're a little off balance because you're doing the most with the least. And so you might, in, the context of government, have a lot of resources, little autonomy. So that's the balancing act. And then
Hmm.
the third is brand equity. And, for people who aren't marketers, that has nothing to do with money. That is like, what is the quality of your brand or your
Hmm.
company? Do people perceive it as positive? Do they perceive it at all? Do they even
Hmm.
know what this thing is? And so realizing that like some measure of positive brand equity, a lot of autonomy, and enough resources were sort of that magic formula when I do my best work. I
Hmm.
have to say now in the earlier stages of Move Over Bob, I could have more resources, but I feel like where I lack a little bit in that, I'm just so sure, and the other parts are really humming along.
Hmm.
But yeah, these are not things that you can read in a book, and often I think that they're really not encouraged. Like we're not typically encouraged to think about what our value sets are as they
Hmm.
are like overlaid with a professional journey. Obviously, money is at the core. And I think for a lot of people, it's very standard, right? And it's required. You have a mortgage, you have a family, you need a good salary. But there are other layers to
Hmm.
that journey where you can be thinking about like what motivates you, what excites you, what makes you feel full, and kind of add those to the scorecard, if you will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I think too, we're talking a lot today about women. Like you said, that's part of your mission, right? And I love that, obviously. Me too. So, but I think all too often, women especially are taught like you can't have it all. So like maybe you can lean into your strengths and make a lot of money, but you won't necessarily love it and you might have to sacrifice some of your values. Or you could be really altruistic and do something that aligns well with your values, but you have to sacrifice, having a good paycheck or, like I liked this point about over time looking at how those three things fit together because I think we need to not subscribe to the idea that it isn't possible, or it isn't worth striving for, or it isn't worth taking risk around. So kudos to you for being brave. And I love that, the energy is vibing right now. So let's talk about Move Over Bob. And part of the goal here is to brand or rebrand the trades as a more inclusive place for women. Um, so I want to talk about like how you want to do that, but I'm hoping first you can talk about like why is this so important to you personally, but also to the world?
Sure. Well, let's start with that. I mean, there's a macro and there's a micro. The macro is that we swung really far towards college over the last 20, 30 years and really showed, millennials, Gen Z, and increasingly even Gen Alpha, that college is the only way to contribute to society and to be successful and respected. And as a result, we have a workforce that's retiring from construction, skilled trades, advanced manufacturing, a lot of different roles that require not necessarily college, but a lot of expertise in a trade and a specialty. And so we are not able to meet the demands of today, let alone what's going to happen in about 5 years when over 40% of the construction craft labor workforce retires.
Hmm.
And if you're sort of have your finger on the pulse, you're hearing like faint alarm bells. It is not being talked about in mainstream culture. And,
Hmm.
I always joke, I'm like, we're 10 minutes from the zeitgeist. Like, this is going to be an all hands on deck conversation and issue. But there's really no impact that can be made fast enough if we're not playing in culture. The micro level goes back to women, right? Like, what is the clearest A to B to help a woman find financial security?
Hmm.
And if you look at the trends in demand and also again these half the workforce kind of retiring over the next 5 years, there is a huge opportunity to pick up a trade with no college debt and be financially secure indefinitely. Um,
Hmm.
and so that is why we exist. But it's hard to be what you can't see, and I just don't know why anyone thinks we can tell a 14-year-old girl or boy that they should be an electrician because America needs more electricians or a plumber or a welder or an HVAC, tech or sheet metal worker or pipe fitter, whatever. If they've never even seen what one looks like or knows
Hmm.
what one does. And those are both equally important and very different things, right? Like, I don't think I could explain what most of these trades were. I didn't mention in my intro, I went to trade school. I think the pipeline of Hollywood executive to community college pre-apprentice is maybe me, but I'm very
Hmm.
proud to rep these affiliations. And so I went to trade school myself and really took a look around, and I was like, oh man, these girls are kicking butt, actually. That's a whole other conversation. But the reality is women are pretty excellent at most of the most in-demand trades due to a lot of reasons, from interpersonal skills to attention to detail to risk assessment to there's a lot. But showing them that there is a viable, purposeful, financially rewarding career,
Hmm.
surprisingly hasn't been done in a way that is relatable or accessible to the average teenager.
Yeah. So then explain how Move Over Bob aims to play a part in that mission.
Absolutely. So we are really on a mission to center tradeswomen more in mainstream culture so that we can show this next generation of girls a clear path to follow in their footsteps.
Hmm.
There's a lot going on here with retention is a big issue. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat the challenges of being, the 5% of women in trades. You might be alone on a job site. You probably will be. That number jumps to 11% when you're looking at white collar construction work as well. And so we know that without advocacy policies around healthcare, just culture in general within the
Hmm.
workplace, all of that has to change. But where we're starting really is actually showing the representation of the modern tradeswoman who most people, adults included, don't really have their finger on. Like, they don't know what she looks like. And so
Hmm.
really first trying to give them their flowers, say these are pretty badass women. They're
Hmm.
skilled, they're financially independent, they have quirky hobbies that are expensive because they have money, they're women of multitudes, like we
Yeah.
all are. And so by basically showcasing them we have a magazine. That's sort of our first like major product to market is an old-fashioned print magazine, and
Hmm.
it really channels the like teen magazines of the 90s and 2000s before social media, where you ran to that mailbox and you looked
Hmm.
at like what was hip for fall. And what's really funny is that my co-founder and I are hardcore, like we are millennials. She's a lifelong blue collar tradeswoman. I went the white collar route. We met in the middle. But what we shared was like those magazines were our connection to what was cool, what was relevant, how we should be.
Hmm.
You're easily influenced at that age, but as we started doing research to make this magazine, we looked back and we're like, oh man, like those magazines were selling us on some real BS. They were, it was like, what shade of lip gloss do you wear to make like Billy ask you to homecoming? And it was
Hmm.
all tied around boys and being skinny and had nothing to do with power, had nothing to do with financial independence. And so we're like, how can we use that stickiness, that
Hmm.
magic of opening up a tactile magazine with cool pictures and awesome stories and cute, headlines, and actually make it about all of the things that now we as adult women and Angie as a mom of young children, how can we make it a tool to really help girls find themselves at these inflection points in their lives when they're looking for inputs, they're looking
Hmm.
for inspiration. So we're
Yeah.
really trying to start by showing them construction is absolutely for them. Here's a look at these women living their best lives. Oh, and here's a bunch of resources for how you actually do it, how much money you can make, what soft skills you need. No one's
Hmm.
no one's sharing this information, at least not in a way that they're looking at.
Yeah. I think, when I think about some of the conversations that we've had on this podcast over almost 7 years about, you know, improving diversity in field service talent, bringing younger people into the workforce, like we've talked in different ways about a lot of what you're touching on, which is like, how do we kind of like, I wrote an article a long, long time ago that was called Field Service Has a Branding Problem because it's like no one is even talking about the appeal of these roles in terms that anyone is going to relate to. You know what I mean? Like they're maybe listing off like the requirements or at best like the comp package and the benefits, but no one's saying like, here's what's cool about this type of career. Here's how you get to help people. Here's, what it looks like, et cetera. Let alone doing that for girls or women, right? And I also, there's this need to better articulate the potential that exists and both the realities of what the jobs are, because some of them can be grueling, can be, this, that, or the other thing, but also the benefits, right? Not just the lack of debt and financial independence, but ex experientially, what does the day-to-day look like and what might someone love about it? But to do that in a way that is fresh and cool and fun, and has that element of like being excited for the mail to come to, read about these things. And I just think it's such a unique way to make an impact and a really important audience to do it with because when companies are trying to do that, to bring in talent, it's often too little too late, right? Like they're not trying to hire high school kids, right? So they don't necessarily care about influencing those folks. They're worried about who they can bring on, right? But no one is getting into those fields because of all the reasons you said. So this idea of making these roles, more visible, more broadly understood, more relatable, and seen as an actual viable option for young women is just such a powerful idea. So I love it. Huge fan of what you're doing. Can we talk a little bit more about why you chose print?
Oh, I love this question. Yeah. Okay, here's the straight answer. Girls are not Googling how to be a construction worker. It's not
Hmm.
happening. They're on TikTok looking at beauty tutorials, at all of the other things teen girls are looking at. So you can have the biggest ad budget in the world to serve them digital ads in the middle of their YouTube scroll or, or TikTok, Instagram. They're going to scroll right by, not even look at it. Blinders, right? Like I'm sure most people have blinders to ads, even though they're the perfect target for them.
Hmm.
So we knew we needed to create something to get them where they are. Because I will shout this from the rooftops. I really don't believe that this is an issue of interest. I think it's an issue of awareness. And so
Hmm.
how do you get awareness? Well, school. These are where girls are captive for about 7 hours a day. And if they're going to be, more predisposed to the trades, maybe they don't like sitting at a desk for that long every day.
Hmm.
And this glossy magazine that appears in their hands is sort of like a Trojan horse to get them into the funnel, right, of what this world even looks like. And so the magazine, I'm really proud to say, is totally free to schools, nonprofits. We're even in all of Arizona's prisons. Really any group where the trades represent and construction broadly, like a great opportunity for young women and women figuring out what's next. But what's been really interesting is that I thought getting into schools was going to be the biggest barrier. I just thought that was going to be the hardest thing. We're a private company. This is not curriculum. It's an entertaining magazine. And what I found was that schools couldn't get their hands on this fast enough.
Hmm.
A few districts across Arizona needed to like vet and review, and the rest are just like, what is the maximum quantity we can have? Because most school counselors are women. A lot of teachers are women, and also most people in education don't have experience in construction.
Hmm.
So to have a resource that is providing empathy, access, enrichment, tangible resources, it's a gift, right?
Hmm.
And we have QR codes on every page. So obviously, for the majority of people who interact with our magazine, if they walk away saying, wow, that's what a female plumber looks like and is all about, that to me is actually a huge win. I mean,
Hmm.
you can't expect a print magazine to fully convert and change behavior and be the panacea of the construction labor shortage, obviously. But if it even becomes some percentage more normalized that girls are like, oh, okay, I could be a teacher, I could be a lawyer, I could be a accountant, I could be a plumber. Like even
Hmm.
that is like a huge win to me. But for whatever percentage, we'll find out because our first issue is now officially everywhere. There are QR codes. So you're pumped about HVAC, like Lillian, our HVAC like gal, who's our, we feature. She's so awesome. And if you're like, ooh, this is cool, you scan and then you see, videos about Lillian talking about her job, showing off her van, all that stuff. And then there's links to apprenticeships, links to scholarships, links to what it means to actually be an HVAC worker. And so that's sort of this little sneaky funnel of like, cool, if
Hmm.
you like it, just check it out. But if you want more, there's more. And
Yeah.
so that's why we chose print. And then really quick, the other thing in a past life, a big part of my past life was working in international development in some of the poorest contexts in the world. No electricity, no running water. I was working in mostly sub-Saharan Africa. And we used print and radio as a behavior change tool because the cool thing about a magazine is it's not just a few pixels that you're scrolling through. This is
Hmm.
something that goes home in a kid's backpack. And then her mom looks at it, or maybe her cousin or the babysitter, or the life cycle of this thing transcends a moment. And that's
Yeah.
really, really, really powerful. So that was another big reason to choose print. And also like nostalgia's back, baby. Like these kids
Hmm.
are obsessed with the 90s. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not for the low-rise jeans, but like everything else, 90s,
Right.
great, bring it back. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was a very long-winded way to say that's why print.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think, I shared with you, and some people that listen know this, others won't, that, I started my career in print, right? So, I kind of was there for, I don't want to say the death of it, but certainly the evolution of it. And I think it is a very wise choice to bring it back in this manner because of its impact, especially in such a digital world. Like it will stand out. It is a path to, those thoughtful moments, differentiation, what they would scroll through, they may pick up and read and, even engage with further. I also really appreciate how you are curating an experience that bridges the print to digital world, which will, obviously give readers an opportunity to access information that can help them further, but it also gives your advertisers and sponsors a way to, understand how they and you are making an impact. Super smart. But I think what, strikes me most about the mission you're on and the role that Move Over Bob can play is that it's different than a lot of what's out there in the sense of like your focus, your niche, if you will, is that awareness, that relatability, that context building, like seeing what this universe of options is and seeing themselves in it, not necessarily providing the training, the apprenticeships, the pre-apprenticeships, and those things exist, right? It's the source into them that so many struggle with, and that to me is what is really exciting about the part that you are aiming to play. So I love that. Um, I want you to explain to folks briefly because we chatted about this, but you've mentioned Arizona. So like explain why Arizona. You're there.
I'm a native.
Um,
That's one reason,
yeah.
but I actually was gone for 20 years. And besides, like, shout out to my amazing parents who are getting older. I just wanted to be closer to them. But the real answer, well, that's the real answer too. But Arizona is booming with a lot of major industries from, the impact AI is having on the need for data centers, semiconductors, energy, and we cannot find talent fast enough. And
Hmm.
so construction, if you're in this industry, is a very opaque industry. Every state is a little different with how apprenticeships work, with how certifications and licensing works. And so it almost felt disingenuous to put out this this magazine that we're saying can connect you to that next step if we didn't have a really like our arms around the full ecosystem.
Hmm.
And so I have been really, really, really focused on building partnerships across not just education, although I'm proud we have at least 350 schools, all of the major school districts across Arizona, across 13 of 15 counties. I think it's 15 county. We're close. But also with industry, of course, the employers and future employers, and then training. So the unions, the apprenticeships, the pre-apprenticeships, we need to what's been so interesting is like there are very few people threading that needle and
Hmm.
weaving, like just bringing everyone together is a lot of silos, like a lot of
Hmm.
silos. And um as you said, we're not a training provider. Like there are great resources to provide training. We are that cultural sticky glue that's like finding these hard to reach individuals, mostly teen girls, but not exclusively, and
Hmm.
getting them into the funnel. And I think it's hard to find a comp for it, certainly within this industry, because it just hasn't been approached this way.
Hmm.
And I think it's easy to write off marketing as fluff, but if you don't take your messaging to your customer seriously, you're going to wake up and have a workforce that doesn't exist.
Right.
And you're going to need 4 years to train them. And so we have to be thinking super, and this is across any industry, who is the mouthpiece? What
Hmm.
is the what platforms are you using? How are you reaching them? And it's not just like, oh, social media. Like that is not even at all. Like the Gen Z aesthetic is so terrifying to me. Like we are, they're like messy, they want it authentic, whereas like millennials are very curated and very
Hmm.
nice and polished. And so I'm not even the right messenger to most of the girls in my audience. Like I'm able to build the scaffolding of this ecosystem that we're creating, plug in industry, plug in tradeswomen, plug in sort of all of the powers that be in a way to like turn that filter right, like get it right so that then the right messengers have what they need to speak to our audience. And that's
Hmm.
mostly women in the first 10 years of their construction careers. And so I'm really proud of that. That is not something you build in a day. It is not something you throw money at. Well, that helps. But this takes extreme intention and sort of like 19 dimensions of chess, right? Like
Hmm.
it's something that I'm really proud that we're building with intention. And so before we scale nationwide, which is totally the plan, we really had to figure out how everyone comes together in serving the girls.
Hmm.
And it's not as intuitive as maybe even I thought.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think, that's wise. I wanted people to understand that, the objective is for it to scale nationwide. And the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of like the vision, right? So I guess to provide context, your first issue just launched. I can show it to
My
people
baby.
if, hold
Yeah.
on, I might need to turn off
Blur.
yeah, and then the people that are on audio only are going to be like, what's she showing? But I'm just showing
Those
the
are
magazine
19-year-olds, by the way,
itself. So
making
cool.
about $35 an hour.
So cool. And like the story, the layout, the stories, everything is great. I told Kate, like, I got it this weekend, read it front to back, and even the little card that came with it, like obsessed. I'm going to share more about that. But um, so the first issue just came out. So you're really have been focused on building that solid start and getting things going. But I want to shift, not to make promises to anyone, but just to kind of give people the vision. Obviously, this print publication is this tool to, have those moments of drawing in people's attention and connecting the dots and seeing this potential. But I know you also have a vision for how this can be sort of a source of community in the trades. Can you talk a little bit about that piece and how you kind of see things coming together over time?
Absolutely. My favorite thing to dream about. So, we're not a magazine company, and I will always make sure to say that. This was the most strategic and sort of obvious way to get in and sort of show up with a tangible product. But our goal is to become really that ubiquitous one-stop shop for women navigating their construction careers, whether they're just exploring, whether they're a third year apprentice or whether they're ready to take that leap and become a business owner and they need to figure out how to finance a van, you know? So we really want to be that sisterhood, that safe, inclusive, funny, quirky, accessible community
Hmm.
for women to not only get what they need, whether it's, you know, what maternity wear, like workwear can I wear, like, or like what steel-toed boots aren't like, you know, like brutal on my feet, or, you know, what, like basically everything from like, what are your recommendations for me as a woman to do my job effectively, to what are the financial strategies I can employ as I do make more money than maybe anyone in my family has ever made.
Hmm.
Or I'm like lonely. I'm the only girl on my job site and I want to talk to other women who are in my shoes. And so becoming that sort of multifaceted community, we're not trying to replace unions. We're not replacing company culture. You know, I don't like saying the word sorority because obviously that's as far from like the blue collar experience as possible, but truly it is a sisterhood.
Hmm.
And really what I'm most excited about is how can we best serve tradeswomen, women already kind of walking the walk, so that we can then we can ask them basically
Hmm.
to join us in this movement of reaching the next generation, and pulling them up and showing them what it looks like
Yeah.
to be a woman in construction. So the other part of this vision, so like kind of like a marketplace sort of is one piece, but because my background is in media, you know, I spent time in LA at a studio, at a film studio. I really believe going back to like culture change is the only way to accelerate and catalyze this movement fast
Hmm.
enough for it to meet demand. 7 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, I don't know. I want to see the lead in a sitcom as a plumber, and
Hmm.
she's like the plot line is not her as a plot, like her being a girl plumber. It's just like she's a plumber. That's like
Hmm.
her job. But before that, there is a massive world of commerce to bring along, and that
Hmm.
is really like what consumer. The tradeswoman lifestyle is a lifestyle, right? Like you need sunscreen, you need chapstick, you need shoes, you need hats, you need deodorant, like you need tools, you need a truck. And right now, there might be zero options for the things you need. There might be one option, there might be two options in terms of like
Hmm.
workwear and stuff. And what I hear routinely from young women that are in trades, they're like, you know, the only thing we're jealous of is that guys have more clothing options. And so just because a woman chooses a more traditionally like masculine, I don't even like saying that, but like a role that has mostly men in it,
Hmm.
that shouldn't mean she negates her ability to have self-expression in the
Right.
workplace. Like she should be able to wear clothes that she can do the job in and that reflect her personal identity, just like men can.
Hmm.
And the fact that like CMOs and marketers of these major brands don't really have much awareness or connection to this blue collar cohort of consumer is truly a detriment because they're not providing them with what they need, which ultimately creates reasons for, you know, poor retention if you don't
Hmm.
have what you need to do your job. But it also not showing them in their ads in media. They're not socializing this lifestyle with girls who are
Hmm.
consuming that content as part of their other, you know, content and scrolling journey. So I know that's like kind of wonky, but we have to bring brands along to be creating for and marketing to and about this, you know, these women.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like again, it's very hard to ask a teenage girl to say you should pursue this path for these bullet points. It's just
Right.
they don't see it, it's not happening.
Yeah, and I think, some of the roles you're talking about, people like can understand by name, but we also talk a lot about how in the world of the people in this podcast, right? There's sort of like this often invisible ecosystem of people that keep everything around us running and functioning, and you don't think about that. Like, you don't think about, we talked just before we started about like the elevator industry. You don't think about like when you start to break it down industry by industry and think about, um, the technicians and the frontline workers that make all of that happen. There's so many options that no one would, especially when you're young, like think just, oh, like I could do this, right? So going back to this idea of how much representation matters, another point I read on your LinkedIn that struck me is that your dad was in the trades. And like, even still, with someone in your family in the trades, like, you never considered it as an option for yourself.
Ever. He still is. He sells nuts and bolts. It
Hmm.
says tried and true, trades. And my mom was trades adjacent. She sold wallpaper to home builders.
Hmm.
Construction put food on our table. And because the narrative of the 90s and early 2000s and today, frankly, were college or bust, nobody was exploring the ROI on 4-year degrees. At that time, it was like, you get one, you're good. And like,
Hmm.
clearly, that is not the case. And so, even my own parents, who I love and who only wanted the best for me, didn't have the like information or like were sort of possessed by the stigmas of what, the powers that be kind of fed us. And
Hmm.
that's another huge audience for us, or parents, frankly. When parents don't know that a kid can, an electrician, an 18, 19, 20-year-old can be making six figures within a couple years of becoming a journeyman. That changes the conversation really fast. But
Hmm.
but yeah, getting parents to see around these like stigmas, like these stereotypes, frankly, right?
Well,
That's what
because most or many of the parents today are the generations that were taught that, like, if you do not go to college, you won't amount to anything, right? So that's a really hard programming to shift to look at the modern landscape of the working world and understand, like, not that there's anything wrong with college, right? But like, there's so many other options. And I think, like, I'm fortunate in the work I do that I understand that very well. And so I don't even, I mean, even to the extent that when someone said, like, open a 529 for your children, I'm like, I don't know, like, maybe they won't, right? Which you can do other things with it. But yeah, I think there's, that conditioning has the risk of going on and on if, we don't do this reframing. So that's a really important point.
Well, really quick to add on to that, AI is flipping the script on everything. Like,
Hmm.
you don't need to be an economist to know that white collar jobs are being decimated in through automation, through AI making things just obsolete for humans to do. And what's so ironic, like I gotta write an op-ed on this, but Google just invested $3 million dollars in IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, to create more electricians. Why do you think? Well, because AI is creating the need for more data centers to house all of this. And so, what's so interesting is as white collar jobs are under threat, we need blue collar jobs more than ever.
Hmm.
So, I will never say like college isn't a good path. I mean, I'm so grateful for my college education and I was meant for that path. I was also meant
Hmm.
for the trades. But if you have a clear vision of what you want to do that requires a college degree, absolutely pursue that. If you don't, I just don't want you to languish in
Hmm.
in endless classes and student debt, or even worse, like dead end jobs, or jobs that use your body in a physical way when you don't know that down the street there is a union hall or an employer that wants you to get a trade on their dime and pay you from
Hmm.
day one. Like, this is where I, just want people to make up their own minds, but they need the information.
Yeah, it's just having a more well-rounded and well-represented understanding of what options are and what they mean. Yeah. So you shared with me when we spoke. So this conversation and what you're doing, it reminds me how powerful it is when women support women and women want to lift others up and, like you said, create a sisterhood, right? So I'm a big fan of that. I'm also a big fan of vulnerability and honesty. And one of the things you shared with me is that as you embarked on this journey and got involved with Angie to co-create Move Over Bob, you had a bout of imposter syndrome. Can you talk a little bit about that? And because I'm sure like, from the marketing standpoint, like, you do not present in that way. Which is why I think it's important to own and address, right? Because when we hear other people talk about that, then we realize many of us go through it, right? So can you share a little bit about that and how you've worked through it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because the imposter syndrome of today, well, it's definitely ebbing, fortunately, but it's very different than what it looked like in my 20s when I absolutely questioned my fundamental right to exist in this world. Like a decade ago, or maybe less than that even, I just was scared to do anything. Like I just thought I would be found out. That, fortunately, with time and constantly proving to myself that I am capable, I no longer feel like I don't belong in the room. Where I felt imposter syndrome entering construction was that I had not spent years on a job site. Like
Hmm.
I did go to trade school and I'm really proud of that and that matters. Like it does I hope show that like I take this seriously. Like I want to when I'm talking to teen girls, I want to say, yeah, this is what I do with this all this hair and a welding hood, or this is how I felt using a chop saw amazing, right? And so I felt though to build a company and to be a voice, I like to chat, in this industry, it made me really nervous that like maybe I hadn't earned my stripes to have a point of view in workforce and in construction. And so when I started out, I was a lot not less ambitious because that's not possible for me, but I was really pointing, this is really funny to say out loud. I was really going to focus on like kind of bougie women who like around the self-empowerment angle of like you buy your own house, girl, that's amazing. Now let's teach you how to fix it or like do
Hmm.
things with it because I thought that was my lane. And when I looked around, and especially when I joined forces with Angie, who is a incredibly renowned carpenter, frankly. But she's owned a construction company for 10 years. And prior to that, she was a barber for 10 years. So she is trades through and through and just an incredible advocate for women in trades. But I didn't think my voice was eligible. And now that I'm in it, I realize like it is not a competition. There are not lanes. This is urgent. And when you have a fresh point of view, as long as you can sort of like respect and listen and, incorporate counsel, you don't have to take it always, from those who came before. Um, you deserve to be there
Hmm.
because if you, in fact, like me having a different POV, I feel pretty proud of what we've
Yeah.
accomplished in the last 9 months. And so if you are sort of looking at this stuff every day, it's very hard to take your head away from the like granular level. And so we do actually need fresh perspectives. Um,
Hmm.
but because our customers are girls, obviously, like, and I don't mean customers and I'm selling to them, but like who I'm serving, there are a lot of variables and a lot of factors. And so I don't do anything without having tradeswomen weigh in, without having educators weigh in. And so as an entrepreneur, what I know to be true now is like don't compromise your vision. Like do
Hmm.
it with integrity and like do your homework, but like the way you see the world is singular and or at least one of few. And if you have the like ovaries or the, whatever to go forth and actually put it all on the line for that, do not dilute it and try to hit a single. Like you go for the grand slam and
Hmm.
hopefully, you make some impact, but playing it safe is if you have a job, you got to play it safe when you have a job. So all that to say, like the imposter syndrome comes and goes, but
Yeah.
I know that I operate from a place of do no harm and I'm bringing something fresh and I like to collaborate. And so
Hmm.
that's it. Like that's all you can ask for. We're all making it up as we go.
Yeah. I think it's just such an important reminder for people because when you have the personality you have, but also when you're as driven as you are and as committed to bringing it to life and executing that vision, if you don't share what's going on up here and behind the scenes, people assume you're doing it without self-doubt or you're doing it effortlessly. And then when they encounter those feelings, they feel like they're not built for it. And it's important for people to remember that we can all be built for it. Like moments of self-doubt or struggle do not mean anything in terms of, what you're capable of. I also really think it's a great reminder of the power of diversity, not as a buzzword, but like true diversity, which is, you know, your imposter syndrome came from maybe I don't fit because I didn't, have this background, but maybe you were what's missing, right? To really create something incredible. And I also think about that in the context of Move Over Bob, in the sense of, like you said, there are these amazing resources but they're siloed. And maybe this is, a missing link to bring that together and bring it to life for the people it can impact most. So I'm very excited for the journey. Where can people learn more?
Moveoverbob.com.
It's that
And
easy,
we're on all
folks.
the socials, but that's where to find us. And because this hasn't come up earlier, we don't hate Bob. We love Bob,
Right.
right? Like construction's a very cheeky industry. So a name like this, you're gonna remember it by
Hmm.
design. But if you go to our website, you'll find our nod to Bob,
Hmm.
and where we say, Bob was our first mentor. Bob was the first person to put a tool in our hands. We love Bob. Bob
Yes.
just needs to scooch over a little to the left or
And
right.
make room.
That's it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I love it. Perfect. So everyone, check out moveoverbob.com. Kate, thank you so much for coming. I am just really excited about what you and Angie are creating, and pumped to follow along and support however I can. So thanks for coming and sharing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you can find more by visiting the home of the podcast at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.